and good morning. It's a Skeetnet special. It's bright and sunny. Everything's looking kind of wonderful and spring-like, and it's time to engage and meet and get to know HM Sole. How you doing?
I'm doing great. What am I? Actually, yeah, we're doing really good here.
So the local media was blessed with the news that you're going to be standing as a candidate for the constituency of Malew and Castletown. This is in the election in September 21. There's got to be a story. Please share it with us.
Um, when I first moved to the Isle of Man, like some 7 odd years ago, I lived out here in Castletown and Malew for a few years, and it's one of the I would say places on the island where when you're here, you feel that there's a strong sense of community and a lot of people, a lot of friends, and just seeing what's happened, over the course of, the world and the pandemic, you just want to be around good and lovely people and people that are your family and that make you feel like home. And the decision to move back here was actually, quite refreshing and rejuvenating, and I know that I can represent a lot of the views and opinions and questions that are here in my local area.
Okay, so at this present time, it would be fair to say that our government is on the ropes.
Mm.
Circumstances have been dramatic, haven't they? Absolutely dramatic, and events in this last week have really painted a picture. Is politics the thing for you? I mean, the politicians are under so much scrutiny, they've got so much responsibility. How would you deal with that?
What's really interesting is that people normally there's a saying that says that individuals who don't engage with politics and are not interested in it find themselves being ruled by people that are. And I find myself constantly in a situation of a backwards foot, where if we're not then pushing forward, trying to improve our quality of life, that of our environment, and our culture and community, then we don't really get the right to criticize those who. And I think that at the end of the day, we have a very big decision to make going forward into this general election in 2021, I said this year. I think that this is where people do take that grievance. If they felt that there was a thing that should have been done or that could have been done, and there's a candidate out there that's actually listening to people and wanting to fight for those views and to see a better island, which is essentially what I'm running for, then those are the types of people that we should be voting in. So we need to kind of start focusing on the next steps, our future, our vision, not just as an island, but as a country, as a nation. We have that opportunity to rewrite what government does, and those are the types of reforms that I'll be pushing.
Well, you've settled in Castletown, which is the former capital of the nation, and it is something that is quite special, isn't it? It's a beautiful town centre. It's flanked with a medieval castle. What are the needs of the constituents, the people of Castletown and Malew? What have you sensed so far? What are they going to be voting for?
What's really interesting is that this year, with the call to, or pretty much the announcement for my candidacy, I wanted to launch with a survey. And it was an island-wide survey, so anyone could actually take it. And by building up some of this data already from some of the constituents in the South in particular, their biggest interests are what is the future of their places of employment and work. As we've seen recently with so many different jobs being lost within certain sectors, specifically finance. Castletown has also lost its Isle of Man Bank branch location. I mean, these are quite disruptive aspects to the daily life in Castletown. But even as far as into the Malew and wider Russian areas, I mean, the airport services a lot of industry to the south in sectors which are not solely related to the aircraft hangar. You have individuals who run taxi services, who have restaurants and in places like B&Bs, and what they want to see is some certainty, some at least fairness over how the actual society is run here in the South, and not just so Douglas centric. There's so much concentration and media attention that goes into infrastructure projects, which are mainly dealing with Douglas or the promenade, as we've seen. But there are some really innovative and very strong willed individuals here in the South as well, who want to see the South kind of go through its own renaissance. And that's happening. Some amazing new retail, pop-up locations which have occurred, amazing new restaurants, noodle shops, pizza. We even have some of these amazing places like, I call it my little fairy shop, where you can still go in and get a hug from people. And that's the type of culture I think people want to see continue. They don't want to see that go away. So they want to fight for those things which are a lot more meaningful and heartfelt, basically, looking at the quality of life, but also some certainty around our economic future and how we're going to move forward. What are the job situations going to look like? Where are we going to get the money to pay for our much needed services? And what's the retention rate? How are we going to be able to keep people here on the island?
That's quite a comprehensive answer that you've given me there. And I think it's fair to say that the South perhaps hasn't been represented as much as what it could have been, because the likes of, say, Castletown and Malew, you've got one member, you've got Jason Morehouse, who is active. There's a lot of questioning in the Keys. He's got quite a profile. The other member is part of the Comyn group, and for Port Erin and Arbory and Castle and Port St Mary, it's a similar setup, and I've just missed out Russian, of course. It's a similar setup where there doesn't seem to be the voice outside of the cohort, if you like. So where would you stand? Would you be engaging? Would you be challenging? Is that your what can I say, your approach?
Absolutely. I think if people have followed me on social media for the past few years within the political conversations that I've been working to try to challenge a bit on the Isle of Man, what they'll see is an individual who is constantly trying to figure out how to champion the needs of not just the one local constituency, but how that constituency puts out that brand image to the rest of the island and how we interact and engage with each other. So I do think that, as just for the very reasons that you said, that there needs to be a dramatic reform within how we appoint Comyn or the Council of Ministers, and also to how we then know who to go to raise certain questions. I feel that there needs to be almost an education process to members of the public about how our government actually works and runs. And this was one of the reasons why I wanted to announce quite early on in the race, because typically you're having to do multiple different things. You're wearing multiple hats. But in its first instance, I mean, you look at something like the Douglas South by-election, which I ran in, only 36.7% of the actual voting population turned out to vote. And those types of numbers, even though it's a by-election, it's something that's quite alarming to me. And I feel that it's not so much voter apathy. I do believe that people are genuinely confused about how to go about this process. And if I can be a voice that kind of in cultures and helps individuals to take more of a pride within that ability and right to vote and to want to see change, then I feel like I'm doing half of my job right there.
I think you'll have your work cut out in Castletown. I think there'll be a higher turnout for sure. It's quite a close community, and in some ways, that the Castletown neighbourhood is a little bit different to that outside in Malew. So, for instance, you're going to be doorstepped about, say, have we got a housing crisis on the Isle of Man? How can young people get on the housing ladder, or how can anyone, say, get into a local authority house? What kind of suggestions or ideas would you come up with to deal with that?
Well, I think that at the very first instance, we need an individual who's going to step forward and say, look, I want to lead the government. As it currently stands, we normally have to wait for a month or two in order to know who the chief minister is going to be. what members of the Keys are they then going to appoint to the Council of Ministers, and for what purposes? What are their interests? And in its very first step, like I said, from having the survey and having people respond back to it and telling me what their needs are in the local constituency, in order to do that, you have to show yourself as an individual who can then inspire and encourage other people running with you to have similarly an aligned vision to that. The reform I would like to see is a shrinking of the Keys, honestly. I want to see 12 members within the House of Keys and Komen as a separate institution, which is then there to regulate the government departments. I think part of the reasons why we probably haven't heard from several members of the Council of Ministers with regards to their constituencies is because of the amount of work that they're having to deal with in a department level. And we're not getting the best out of our MHKs in that regard. So having people who are dedicated specifically to that constituency, which are able to be in close communication and to talk to them about their closer needs and issues, is what's going to be the game changer there. And that's one way of beginning to really reunify the community.
So fundamentally, it's looking at reorganising Tynwald and how we operate.
Definitely.
And reducing the sort of scale of governance. So, for instance, does that kind of carry on into our, you could say, our bloated civil service? It seems to me that the majority of the population are employed by the government at the moment, and we can't really sustain that. How are we going to deal with that? Because we've got the pension crisis looming. This must be something that is it's going to put you on the spot.
Well, strangely as well, I think too that I wouldn't blame the civil service for the structure. I feel that what's happened through many different generations of Tynwald members, as well as members of the civil service, is that they've just found themselves part of almost a nebulous system of how things were. And the moment that anyone wants to stand up above that parapet, they're then criticized. They're told that they're crazy. They're told that their ideal will never work, and it becomes this constant reinvention of the same old problems over and over and over again, election in and election out. What we need more so than ever is that bravery out of people, and I believe we're getting it. I believe that there's certain candidates that are kind of like beginning to circle a bit more and to want to seize some of that dramatic change. But if we don't have a financial and economic future for the Isle of Man, i.e., new sectors, new industries, new businesses coming here to set them up, I feel that the island's history in and of itself has always been a place of multiculturalism, multinationalism, individuals that have come from all parts of the world who've brought with them and also infused quite successfully with what we would consider a Manx culture. And that just needs to be celebrated a little bit more and encouraged outside of the island, that we are still that open and welcoming place, bar the pandemic. We're still that open and welcoming place with our minds and hearts at least. And that we are willing to try a new system and a new structure.
Well, I've just had a couple of comments in the box, and if you're watching, or if you're watching on a catch-up later on, please add your comments. But we're welcoming you. So we've got Tony, and he's saying, "What about opposition to the 12?" So I'm imagining that if you suggest that the scope, the amount of members is reduced from 24 to 12, some people would argue that that is going to give less representation for the people. A quick answer on that one?
Oh yeah, I believe that quite similar to how we've divided the island in the past, essentially having 4 of its quadrants, north, south, east, and west, with 3 MHKs, and I feel that that's one way to kind of begin to approach it. The second one is the fact that many of the local councils and commissioners are beginning to somewhat consider merging or have merged. And I do believe that that is something that's very much in line with the vision I see the Isle of Man going to in the future. Having this many, oversight or too many captains and not enough individuals which are able to kind of work together is part of our problem, part of our challenge. So beginning to see that there is a lot more representation if you begin to combine places and to diminish rates and things like that in local areas, I believe it will be a massive step going forward. to cut some of that overhead cost by merging.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, especially with the south, because we've got administration centres for local government in Castletown, Port St Mary, Port Erin, Ballasalla, which is Malew, and then the couple of smaller districts. So you're looking at what, 5-6 administration centres, where surely the costs could be compressed. I think everyone would love to see that. Still have representation. Yeah. Still have representation, still have your neighbourhood having a voice around the table, but really that is something so simple. I've just got another one in the box from Mark. What's the transition going to be like? You appeared as a candidate in Douglas and now you've kind of migrated a bit south. Do you think there'll be any challenges there?
I think with any time that you're getting reintroduced to people, there's always a challenge. At the very end of the day, I think people just want to know that you're there for them. So like I said, starting out early for me was the opportunity to get online and to start making some of those relationships with people before the actual knocking on door canvassing can actually occur again. And I feel that's one of the major setbacks is people are so used to this dynamic that we have that's face to face. But I think with the wonders of things like Zoom and the ability to Skype and things like that, and for people just to be able to know that they can contact you on social media is a start. People are now spending a lot more time at home. So, it's actually, they're in their house now. So, when you normally go around and knock on the door and someone's not really there to answer it, or they just don't feel like talking. I think this is actually a lot more of a measured and interesting way to try a new style of canvassing, and that's what I kind of want to do whilst I'm here.
Okay, so there must be some issues that are on your mind that need addressing aside of what you've said. Is the green issue? Is that something which you're passionate about?
Absolutely. I feel that focus primarily should be on planet, people, and how we then interact with quality of life. If we have those three things, then we have a very happy island. And that quality of life is brought through things like green energy, clean tech, infrastructure, which is honoring that of international trade, commerce, and specifically customs, and then you move over into university education. So pretty much in my last manifesto, a lot of those things which I focused in for the local, approach can be reflective quite. These are all used, these are things all need, and I feel that by having a champion there to essentially fight for that within the keys is the next step as it relates to policies. And that's what I really want to see kind of happen. So the green, component is one of those steps, but I feel that just even looking at the recent vote, which was quite sad to see that the vast majority of the keys and the entire Council of Ministers voted against the climate, was a bit of a shock. We're a smaller island, but I don't see that as our weakness. I see that as our strength. We don't have to be this large, barge that the United Kingdom is. We get to be that speedboat to actually start making some very significant changes around environment and economy.
Well, we've only got 85,000 people living here, and you'd think it'd be simple just to try and make some changes where our efficiency could be improved by 20%. Wouldn't that be easy?
You would think, but it's kind of one of those things where if we're working with a system that is profoundly, outdated at this moment, I do believe that some of the changes in the 1970s, 1980s for the Isle of Man about having much more of that domestic or home rule type of presence set in line that stage for us to start making more independent and sovereign decisions from Whitehall and Westminster. And I want to see that continue by the Isle of Man becoming and using that historic national identity of being an independent and sovereign place come out a lot more within the politics as we get closer to the September 2021 election.
So, what about matters on a more local level? What would you say about the quality of the roads, speed limits, road safety? Should we be all jumping on free buses? Plans for electric bikes? these are things that you're going to be approached about when you're out canvassing. Just a few thoughts.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I would say that my vision for the Isle of Man is that within the next 10 years, we will be completely carbon neutral. And that is a very doable next step. And I do believe that by helping to ensure that we do have free transportation for every single person here on the island, that we're not having to worry about driving into town and the traffic, the cluster of that on the roads, I think are some. And then possibly even looking into what solutions may occur below ground, possibly tunneling and creating, rail systems. These types of mindsets are what the vast majority of the industrial world have kind of already gone through, and they've begun to start looking at more economic and environmental sensible ways by which to move people around. And I do believe that from a local level, that will completely transform and change how our quality of life is with one another. We take out some of the stresses and pressures, and that's something that I would definitely be fighting for and voting for in the Keys.
It's incredible, isn't it, that in the Victorian times, the 1890s up into the Edwardian era, the Renaissance, where so many projects, so much came to the island. You're talking about, this is a place that had steam railways, electric railways, beautiful hotels built, and then it stopped.
The Royal Lifeboat Service.
and the thing is, we've got it. We've demonstrated that we can make things happen. So you mentioned just before about tunnelling. Was that a reference to the under the Irish Sea, the Boris Johnson thought?
One of the funny things is the fact that I feel that there is a logic for the Isle of Man being a customs jurisdiction once again. And under Boris's plan, the Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, it wouldn't see the Isle of Man as that. The types of things the Isle of Man would have to do in order to make use of that type of relationship would not be to tunnel around the island, but to literally regulate trade through the Irish Sea and actually have, various different custom checkpoints. Historically, we've been the middleman. I believe that we're the perfect solution to the Irish backstop situation, at least by being able to manage an administrative hub and center for some of the customs components between the two nations. And we would see the Isle of Man make a percentage of that GDP. But what you need is a strong leader that's able to go to Whitehall and begin to negotiate for us to do that. The longer we stay in this quasi-relationship that we have through the Common Purse Agreement in the United Kingdom, is the longer that both sides will continue to be unhappy. And I believe that it's time that we remember our historic role, and we take ownership and authorship of making that deal between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland.
Well, at the moment,
So
a lot of
it's hard a solution, but customs definitely.
a lot of people will picture that image, from the press the other week, that it's fantasy. Was it a distraction away from the pandemic and the challenges that they've got? And locally, it's been said that we've got challenges ourselves on the health front. We've got quite a lot of building going on in the south. Certainly, you've seen it in Ballasalla, and there's plans, and there's places being built in Castletown and so forth. And yet, are the public services, the doctors' surgeries, the schools, are they ready to cope with this extra pressure?
Absolutely not. And like I said, I don't believe this is something that happens overnight. I do, however, believe that we have to start planning in for a vision of the future that exists well beyond the pandemic. There is no reason as to why the Isle of Man could not be pandemic proof. I mean, with the right policies and with the right people involved, there are no limits. And I do think that from an economic standpoint, one of the key things that I've been pushing for quite some time here on the Isle of Man is an international trade commission. So one of the wonderful parts of the Isle of Man is that we could see new businesses seeded here on the island and develop new sectors. And those, stem from all types of educational platforms to more labor field or mechanical jobs for people. And if you've recently seen those unemployment numbers from just a month ago, how many people have been unemployed? 64% of that were working men. And I think that you're beginning to see how that has a knock-on effect onto what we would consider the family dynamic and family structure. And talk about things, being felt on that local level as well. There's all of that strain. I mean, individuals, when they're in situations where they're locked into homes and they don't feel domestically important, or that their lives are crumbling, turn to acts of violence, or just fear and are afraid. And I feel that the only way that we're able to move forward in any of these types of situations is to begin to start developing a new narrative for what the Isle of Man can be, and start making sure that we're funding those visionaries and opportunities on the island for people to encounter that. So that's kind of what it is. I think that it's time that we start funding that vision.
I do like that, and I like that direction. And it's great to talk about jobs, it's great to talk about industry coming to the island, but in what form? And this really is the, what can I say, the golden nugget. I've heard some good things. There is money coming into the island, and I can see new businesses and industries popping up, and they will, take on people who are looking for employment. But where do you see this going? Is online gaming a safe bet, or are they dancing with the devil, or is there something which we could explore? Is tourism an option? Are these sort of ideas, are these on your mind?
Absolutely. I think that if you're looking at something like a supply chain, and having different things kind of create around it, the Isle of Man's basic concept and identity at the moment is, look how beautiful this place is. And I feel that if we're beginning to start looking at a new form of tourism, whether that be ecological tourism, if we're looking at ways of creating entertainment, leisure, that has to come from a specific set of other industries. So you need those more capitalistic designed institutions, which kind of then bring in the reason why you would have people coming into the island, the draw. And that niche for me, I would say, would be a rise within university education that begins to start teaching individuals about green energy and clean infrastructure. So from a laboring component, I feel that that's one of the reasons why people would want to come here. The finance industry has all but seen so many different fluctuations, so we don't want to lean so heavily on it. However, I would say that if we look at a wider scope of what the Isle of Man can be, stop trying to go with the same small-minded little sectors of trying to pick up the little pennies here, but be bolder in our imagination of the island and what role it could serve within the stage of global politics. I think that begins to start opening up much more than just our mindset, but our ability to receive certain industries and the money that they bring with them.
I've got to say, I absolutely commend that style of thinking. That is a great stance, and I'm sure that is going to appeal. So during the campaign, how are folk going to get in touch with you? I take it you'll have a doorstep approach as well, but really, how are we going to get in contact with HM Sole?
So I will be posting every day from now to the election. So people will be constantly updated about the things that I believe are important. The candidates I'm hoping to work with in the not so distant future, and just pretty much Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even by phone. So they can contact my campaign manager and get direct in contact with me, and I'm always virtually around for a few hours out of the day just to answer any questions that people have. I take great pride in the ability of being able just to have a cup of tea, even if it's virtual, with people, and have a conversation. I think that that's one of the great parts about our island, and I want to kind of keep that going for the country even through the pandemic.
Well, we're just coming up to half an hour, so I think we'll just cut it shortly. But it would be great to have you back, maybe in a few weeks, when maybe at that time you'll have a little bit more in the notepad about what the issues people are thinking about, yeah? And we could touch base again, but I'm so grateful for you taking time this morning, and we'll catch up again.
Definitely. Thank you so much. See you soon.